Greetings, Japan fans. In today's show, we've got a special guest, an old friend of mine, Harry Hill, who went from being an English teacher in Gifu, which is in the central part of Japan, Chubu region, to starting a business that turned into a $700 million business. This is how he did that. Listen for some real diamonds from Harry Hill. Japanese phrase. Now, if you want to go, say, window shopping, particularly you want to go maybe down to Ginza or on the boutiques there and have this bit of window shopping, see what's available, then you can say Bura shinai, Bura shinai, Bura shinai. Why don't we go window shopping? Bura shinai, Bura shinai, Bura shinai. Let's go window shopping. I want to go look around Ginza. Let's track around the Ginza. Bura shinai, Bura shinai. Now, in the case of the Ginza, we actually add a little word that we say Ginbura shinai. Let's go window shopping in the Ginza. Ginza, Gin, Bura, to wander around. Ginbura shinai, Ginbura shinai, Ginbura shinai. Now, this is episode number 330. And today our special guest is Harry Hill, ex-CEO of Shop Japan. And this is an interview we recorded in the High Performance Center in our headquarters in Akasaka. And so please enjoy this conversation with someone who's really an outstanding businessman, track record like you cannot believe it. The man is a legend here in Tokyo, Harry Hill. So it's a great pleasure today to welcome an old friend of mine, Harry Hill, who I've known since, 1992 when I came back to Japan working in Nagoya. We met down there, and Harry has gone on to run a number of businesses in Japan. He's really very, very flexible, I guess, in the sort of industries he's covered, and was the CEO, ex-CEO of Shop Japan, which is quite a big enterprise in Japan, and now has a new venture, which he just started recently. But we're here today to talk about leadership. So, Harry, just for the sake of our listeners and our viewers, give us a bit of background on the things you've done in Japan, because you've done quite a lot of things here. So very interesting.
If I were to start, my love affair with Japan started when I was in college.
College, okay.
When I saw Shorinji Kempo being practiced.
Shorinji Kempo.
Near my dorm. Right. And I thought, I've always wanted to do martial arts, and I started Shorinji Kempo. And that was completely accidental, but that was a absolutely eventful time in my life. From Shorinji Kempo, my teachers of Shorinji Kempo were Japanese. One was a guy from Todai, who then ended up at World Bank. And I thought he was just a really interesting guy, just in terms of his focus on what the Shorinji Kempo is both on the mind and the body, the spirit, and he was so influential that I started to become interested in Japan. Then I read a book called Japan is Number One, which you may remember, by Ezra Vogel. And I read that book between my sophomore and junior year of college. And at that point, I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with my life and where I was going to go. And I read that book, and I was looking at the New York Times and thinking about, okay, where are opportunities in life? And I looked at it, I said, I think the opportunities really are going to be in Asia and in Japan. And I didn't see anybody around me who was really preparing for that, where the world was going. So I decided to start studying Japanese, studied 2 years of Japanese, and then came to Japan. My first job in Japan was as an English teacher. Did that for about 2.5 years. In my third year, I was in Gifu Prefecture, which you remember, they had a big expo. I got hired to be the international coordinator for the expo and got to meet with many of the local businesses in the Gifu, Nagoya, Chubu area. And that sort of started me on my business career. After 3.5 years in Japan, my first foray in Japan, I started to get a little concerned. Maybe I'm forgetting that I'm American. Went back and I'd seen the movie Wall Street. You can see I'm influenced by different things that I see or read. I thought, I'm going to try being a bond trader. So I was a bond trader in New York for a short period of time.
Okay.
And then long enough to realize that that's not what I wanted to do. And I came back to Japan in 1990. And that's really when my career as an entrepreneur started. My first forays into business were kind of innovation, and when I say it's innovation, I looked at areas where there were opportunities and there was holes in the market. I started as a sports agent. At the time, sports agents were not allowed in Japan, but there were a couple of agents in the United States who hired me to represent their minor league players. It was at the height of the bubble, and I was able to get some of their minor league players some very good contracts in Japan. I was also doing things back and forth with international relations, doing kind of grassroots events, people-to-people events, helping create sister cities, an exchange between Japanese high schools and colleges between Japan and the United States.
Why Nagoya?
So that was great. So I told you I started in Gifu.
Yeah, but why Gifu?
And then Gifu, I was hired by the Japanese government and told to go to Gifu.
That's where they sent you to Gifu.
So I had pure chance. Just like walking by Shorinji Kempo was pure chance.
Pure chance. Right.
When I came back to Japan, that was calculated, and especially after my experience at the expo, I had built a lot of ties with Chubu businesses. Meitetsu, Ongaki Hyoritsu Bank, Churoku Bank, Tokai Bank, Dentsu, Hakahodo in the Chubu region. So it was clear to me that my base was in Chubu. So that's where I ended up in Nagoya, where we met.
Where we met, exactly. So please pick up the story.
So anyway, so the different types of opportunities I looked at, the first opportunity I saw was an inefficiency in the representation of athletes from the United States in Japan. I got hired by a bunch of agents, and I was able to take advantage of that inefficiency and then do some grassroots exchange as well. As you know, because when you met me in Nagoya, that was when there was the trade friction between Japan and the United States, and there was this tremendous movement of multinational companies, or essentially American aerospace companies, into Nagoya. So Robert Roach and I looked at that and said, well, there's an opportunity to create a relocation and real estate services company for multinationals in Nagoya. We created the first relocation company in Nagoya, H&R Consultants.
Which is still going strong.
Which is still going strong, although other than the name, the H, I have no relationship anymore to H&R Consultants, but I feel proud of it. It's a great company and one that I feel very proud of. Then obviously with Oakland Marketing and Shop Japan, which is where I spent 20 years and really focused on the direct marketing, TV shopping, direct marketing market in Japan. And, obviously we have a huge track record, not just on the direct marketing side and the TV shopping side, but sort of creating different types of genres of hit products. And if you think about it, the overlay mattress.
Billy's Boot Camp springs to mind.
Well, Billy's Boot Camp, and I would say essentially home fitness, and I you know, without trying to sound too immodest, but you know, no one has sold in sort of influenced home fitness kind of to the extent that Shop Japan has. And so again, we're able to look at, but if you look at Billy's Boot Camp or exercise DVDs or home fitness, it's a huge market in the United States and in the world that had not quite penetrated Japan. If I were to think about a theme of my business career, one of my themes is that I actually believe people are people. And I think that sometimes when we come to Japan, people want to talk about Japanese exceptionalism. And absolutely there's a think global, act local aspect. And there's certainly things that are wonderful and unique about Japanese culture. But basically people are people. And we should, instead of focusing on what's unique, the real opportunities are in focusing on what's not unique, and then just customizing that last special sauce at the end.
I mean, how big did Shop Japan get? I mean, you started with Oak Lawn Marketing with, I think, was only a few people in Nagoya at that stage when I met you guys, but it grew into this huge enterprise. And, you know, so what was the sort of start to the sort of end?
Well, as you know, Robert and Tadashi Nakamura started Oak Lawn Marketing, but you know, we were there. Robert and I were already partners with H&R Consultants at the time. When Oak Lawn Marketing started, it was just essentially an import-export company, and they were actually doing import-export for a Japanese TV shopping company. When I decided to join with Oak Lawn and we rolled everything in together in 1999, we were doing about, I guess Oak Lawn was just under $4 billion a year in annual sales.
4 billion.
Yeah, yen, 4 billion yen. So about,
I was getting excited if you're doing 4
no,
billion.
you know, so just a little under $40 million. And we had about 150 employees. We had call centers, and we've grew it up to about 70 billion, so just under $700 million, 1,000 employees. So you know, when I
And that's
took
from
over,
99 till when did you?
2000, and well, to now, right, essentially.
Right, so 2019.
So when I took over as CEO in 2006, we were just under 15 billion yen. And then from 2006 to 2016, we grew from 15 to just under 70.
Right.
And so nice growth.
That's it.
NTT Docomo purchased 51% of us in 2009. So, which, you know, kind of, if you think about my career, I've run a one-man shop, I've run a two-man shop, I've run a 10-man shop. I've had some partners, American partners, I've been by myself, and then all of a sudden we had this huge conglomerate, NTT Docomo, buy 51% of us, and I was running and managing a company of over 1,000 people within this very formal Japanese sort of business conglomerate. So I've had various. I've seen things from different perspectives, different angles, both from the Japan side, the pure Japan side, the pure American side, and things in between.
And I guess, you know, that Docomo purchase is a huge exit for you. And I guess part of the deal is you had to stay in there and keep running it. So you couldn't just take the money and walk away and do something else. So you stayed, Docomo bought it, and how long did you stay? It was quite a number of you stayed with it.
2009 to 2017.
2009 to 2017, you stuck with it all the time. Which again is, as you say, is quite a big contrast to go from having I run my own show to, well, I'm running it with Docomo. And Docomo is a big player, right?
It is. Now, when we did the deal with Docomo in 2009, we actually had a very, very clear vision of the next 3 years, which actually was quite accurate, and we pretty much executed that vision almost to the T. What I knew was going to happen was that there was going to be some large changes in how in media and the way the society was going to operate post 2011. As you remember, the change from analog TV to digital TV, the growth of not only mobile phones but then ultimately smartphones. I knew that was going to, that the technology changes and the changes in delivery of media was going to greatly affect our business. And at that point, it seemed like having a strategic partner that was both local but also brought not just money but also technological know-how was going to be an opportunity for us to have growth and synergy.
Yeah. And so talk a little bit the leadership aspect, I mean, you've gone from, as you say, a startup, you've built companies, and you've actually then taken to a very big scale. What have been some of the sort of leadership challenges that you found when you came and tried to grow those businesses and then join a big company?
Right. Well, I believe that leadership, and over the years, I think I've defined my own vision of leadership. And I think that, one of the things we've talked about, what is leadership, but also what is leadership in Japan? And because when you lead people, you have to lead them in the way that they're going to follow. And I think somebody once asked me, what's the difference between Japan and the United States? And so I'll go back to Shorinji Kempo for a second. Because you practiced karate, but in Japan, when you teach a class, everybody lines up. And it's pretty much everybody lines up, and it lines up, you stand out in front, and then from seniority, it'll go, as you're facing you, it'll go left to right, and then, and go down the ranks, and then set line 2, line 3, and that's the way it is. And what's interesting is everybody is very, very comfortable with that. And while that seems very regimented, actually, because everybody knows their role, their where they're supposed to be, it allows for the easiest sort of ability to maximize performance. In the United States, when I teach Shorinji Kempo, if I lined people up like that, they would immediately feel uncomfortable and rebel. And so the best, I always found the best way to teach a Shorinji Kempo class as a leader in the United States was to make a circle.
Ah, okay.
And if I put everybody in a circle and did things, there was this feeling of everybody's part of the same group.
No hierarchy.
No unnecessary hierarchy. People felt comfortable, and they were very. Not only were they did they perform better, they were much more receptive to what I had to say. I put Japanese people in a circle, and it's much more uncomfortable. Now, I say that not from the perspective. Sometimes you want to. I put as a leader, you put people in a situation where you want them to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to line up Americans in a hierarchical perspective and say, no, this is the way it is, because you want to create a little bit of that friction. But the interesting thing is understanding that and being able to sort of say, okay, and that as a leader, then making that choice. How am I going? What do I want to? How do I want to challenge my group today? How do I do it? Do I want to make it very comfortable, or do I want to make it uncomfortable? And if I'm making it uncomfortable, how do I make it uncomfortable with a purpose? Now, for me as a leader, I've thought about this, and having run the different companies I've run, creating a good culture, I think is just absolutely imperative.
And what does a good culture entail?
I think everybody having a shared sense of purpose and shared values, and not being afraid to talk about that purpose, and always saying, okay, can you tie this purpose to what you're doing? And shared values, where as you start, when you're looking at people and saying, okay, what are you doing? People then can say, why am I doing it? And when if I'm confronted with a problem, if I'm confronted with an issue, how do I approach it from the perspective, not just from the perspective, will it make money or not make money, but how does it fit with the values that I've set for the company and for myself and for my team.
So you're looking for consistency of approach there, that if you say one thing, an issue comes up, you deal with that issue following that culture that you set and following that value set, so that you are walking your talk. So you're not saying one thing and doing another just to, okay, we've got a problem, so we'll ditch our values and we'll take the money. So you've got that consistency.
And I find that consistency, in particular in Japan, is the difference between creating a winning culture versus creating a chaotic culture.
Were there some things that happened that triggered that realization, or that just was something you observed?
Oh no, this is, the school of hard knocks.
Oh, okay.
And if I look at back in the late 90s, early 2000, when we were running our call centers, turnover in call centers and running a call center is not an easy job, because it's call centers, people view that as a kitsui, kitanai, and it's not kiken, but it's you're focusing on performance, you're focusing on efficiency, and it's a high tension culture.
Very numbers driven too.
And very numbers driven, and it has to be numbers driven, because otherwise the business doesn't work out. But when I first took over the call centers at Oakland Marketing in 1999, we were having turnover anywhere from 15 to 20% per month of our communicators. And on the one hand, we had a very high performance call center, and it was making us money. But on the other hand, it was also causing us all sorts of problems. Constantly hiring, firing, training, and then dealing with complaints and often the complaints would come after people had product delivered, and so it was 20, 30, 45 days after the sale. Then we went back to the person who made the sale, and they were gone. So what was interesting is that we were able to actually achieve a reasonably high performance call center, but it was very unstable and non-sustainable. And so then we looked at that and said, how can we really build a better culture just into the call center? How can we turn this around and saying there are all sorts of people in Japan who want to have sort of a non-traditional job. A call center allows for greater flexibility in hours, allows you to sometimes work, through the night, so if you're working, potentially working mother or something like that. So we spent quite a bit of time learning, as I said, through the School of Hard Knocks, that we could create something that was really powerful and with a sense of purpose. That once you have a sense of purpose, and I think there's purpose, there's professionalism, and then there's empowerment. And if everybody gets that same idea that there's a sense of purpose and it's a shared sense of purpose, then the profession that they have, the job that they do, automatically becomes meaningful. And if you think about, and we do HR surveys all the time, and we continue to do HR surveys, and one of the key questions that we ask our employees is, do you think your job is meaningful or not? Does your job matter?
And you chose that question specifically to check back against the purpose, whether the message is getting through or not.
Exactly. And because if the message is getting through and if their job matters, then they'll take pride in what they're doing, and they'll build skills to do that. And then what happens is then they feel a sense of empowerment. And that, and as we built that, and we built that particularly by, I think one of my greatest achievements or, something I'm very proud of is that we created such a good environment and good culture in our call center that we had people who stayed with us for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
In a call center.
In a call center,
That's
where
amazing.
typically we're looking at turnover 2-3 years at best. And so when I ask about, when I talk about purpose and professionalism and empowerment, I believe that by sharing that sense of culture and building that sense of culture, we created something that was very sustainable. The other thing that's great about that is that we then had a team that was able to deal with sort of the highs and lows. And if we had, if there were good times, they would come in and put in extra hours. Through bad times, they would work with us and say, how can we maintain our team so that so if we all have to kind of cut back, we'll all cut back a little bit so that we can kind of maintain this culture and this team mentality.
And how big was the team?
The call center, right now we pretty much moved the call center all to Sapporo. So there's Sapporo and then there's an overflow in Fukuoka, but that team in Sapporo is about 350 people.
That's a big call center, 350 people.
It's a big call center, and but it's also it's a kind of a special place because when I look at the call center, and of course I'm looking now talking specifically about the Shop Japan business, but with the call center I always looked at the communicators as an extension of the customer. Now,
what do you mean by that?
Because they spent so much time daily, literally, 7 to 8 customers per hour that they're talking with, that they start to not only do they understand the customer, but they take on the characteristics of the customer. So I always treated our communicators not only as an extension of the company, but also as an extension of the customer. So
What does that mean?
I built them into all systems, and so that we talked about listening to the communicators. And so we created very, very strong interaction between the head office and the marketing team and the communicators, where were literally not only were listening to, we had a VOC, what we call the voice of customer, but it was the voice of customer. Half of it was the voice of the communicator, and saying, okay, what is the everyday person really saying about what we do and what about our products and what we sell.
So the VOC, the voice of customer, is going to the customer, and then voice of the communicator is a separate survey that you're doing with them.
We'd actually do it almost simultaneously, and so we'd be coming together, putting it together because the communicator was talking to the customer.
Yeah. And that must have been very unusual that the communicators are actually being treated like that, because normally, most call centers, they're just bodies, on the phone all day, and it's a pretty tough life. But it seems like you're empowering them by giving them a voice back into the system about how the system is performing rather than just getting the customer's voice. That's very unique. How did you come up with that idea?
I would spend, I would visit our Sapporo call center 4 or 5 times a year during one of the, I'd always do different types of group discussions, but one of the suggestions that came, this is 8-9 years ago, was that we should do this type of voice of customer, voice of communicator session on a regular basis. I thought it was a great idea, and it was also it was at a time when this, similar to what we'd gone through a little bit in Nagoya in the early 2000s, where morale was at kind of a low within the call center, and it's easy in that type of environment, because it's essentially like a factory type environment, for morale to get low, and so then we turned around. Okay, the best way to improve morale is to actively listen and care. And I think one of the things that I often say is, there are going to be a lot of times when I'm going to listen to you. Just because I'm listening doesn't mean that I agree. But I think that what happens is, and I think this is really key in Japan, if you show that the least empowered voice is going to be listened to, you create a tremendous amount of morale in the organization. And I think it also then, that level of attention permeates through the organization, so that instead of this idea, well, I'm the boss, do what I say, it actually comes say you create this environment saying, look, the role of the boss is to make the final decision, not to override everybody else's opinion. And when we talk about how do you create a better environment for innovation, for new ideas, if every new idea has to come from the top, you're in big trouble.
Today's show is brought to you by our public courses, but we also do custom in-house programs, and we do these both in Japanese and English. So coming up in the leadership area, given that's our theme today, leadership of course, we have our Step Up the Leadership program. That's on the 27th of January. Coming up, this is a one-day program. Excellent bridging course for people who've gone from being a player to now being a player manager, or they've become someone who's in a supervisory position, or they become a leader. This is the course you send them on, so they understand what it means, their current role as a leader, as opposed to a player, or how to get performance going in the team, how to coach people, how to communicate as a leader. All the really important basics they need to know are in this one-day program. As I mentioned, that's going to be on the 27th of January. Now, for leaders who need something a bit more in-depth, we have in November, starts on the 5th of November, runs for 7 weeks, our Leadership Training for Managers program. Very much more detailed. This is this is a Swiss Army knife of leadership. I always say that because it's got everything. You do this course, you are ready to go. Fully blown leader. You're going to be unbelievable because you'll know exactly what to do in all situations. Very practical program. We do 3.5 hours each night over 7 weeks. Time-spaced learning, so between the classes you get to practice what you've learned, put it into real-world practice and see how it's working for you. You get to talk about that when you come back to the program. Genius program. A lot of leaders in Japan become leaders through age and stage, and they're never really trained properly. Can we really afford that anymore? I don't think we can. I think we need to have leaders who are really doing a fantastic job leading, and to help them, we need to train them. This is the program you need to send them to, Leadership Training for Managers. Coming up, it's in November, not far away. Starts on the 5th of November, runs for 7 weeks, right through to December. This is an excellent program. Swiss Army knife of leadership. Get your people on this program. Now, our website's full of useful resources, so check that out on ianjapan.dalecarnegie.com. You can email me, greg.story@dalecarnegie.com, and if you like learning by watching videos, we have over 860 there on our YouTube channel, which is at Japan Dale Carnegie TV. We release 2 TV shows every week on YouTube, the Cutting Edge Japan Business Show, the premier business show on Japan, that comes out every Monday, Tokyo time, and Fridays we have the Japan Business Mastery Show. Get my book, Japan Sales Mastery. This is the Bible for selling in Japan, and my new book, How to Master Business in Japan, Japan Business Mastery. So Harry, I love the voice of the communicator, not just the voice of the customer, the empowerment, the culture, the values, all of that. How would you contrast that, say, with Western leadership, in typical Western companies? What could people who've been brought up in Western culture, Western leadership environments, Western culture environments, coming to Japan, do to do better as leaders, thinking about some things that you've said?
I think, I've talked to a lot of Western leaders who are maybe not as familiar with Japan. And I think one thing that I would always caution Western leaders to do is not to fill up empty space. I think it's easy if you ask a question and you get silence to then fill up the space. And that's where you have to sort of really hold yourself back and truly show that you are engaged and willing to wait to get an opinion. That doesn't always seem like the most efficient way to do business, but what happens, what I see all too often is a focus, and which I completely understand, is a focus on getting things done, but not building a real cultural environment.
So just thinking about that, you're coming out of a very hard-driving Western culture. Time is money. Make decisions, have meetings, make decisions, move on to, as you say, a different decision-making system in Japan.
Right.
Don't fill in the silences because people are thinking many, many things before they want to speak up, as opposed to maybe in a Western environment, we tend to speak first and think later, right. In some cases. So how do you know which is which? How do you know when it's time to sit back and just wait, let it permeate and get the answer?
That's to say I always know, I probably don't. But I would say that one of the keys is, and I always looked at as, I tried never to have the first word. Okay. Now, what I would sometimes do is set the table. And then what I'd look to do is always step back, let somebody else conduct or mediate the meeting, and then at the end, bring things together. To me, that was always the most effective way of leading. Now, because that would be my normal way of leading, when I brought people together and said, okay, today I'm going to do all the talking, it actually was much more effective and had a much higher impact, because that wasn't the way I would normally operate. Normally I'd start, I'd listen, I'd synthesize, and I'd make a decision. And so when we did the opposite, people's like, this must be really important, have to do it this way.
I guess the first, synthesis, listening, having people speak is more of a Japanese.
It is, and which is sort of funny, because when I told you the easiest way to teach was to line people up. But the easiest way to run a meeting is to really almost be overly attentive to giving everybody the opportunity to voice their opinion and to show either commitment or whether or not they're uncomfortable with something. Whereas on the Western side, when you teach children, you have to put them all in a circle. But in a meeting, it's Westerners seem to actually, in a business environment, they actually, I think, are much more accepting. Oh no, the boss said to do this. Don't question it. Now, I believe, and I've said this to many, many people, and whether it's the products or companies that we've run, I think getting buy-in from a Japanese team is really hard. I think once you get buy-in, Japanese teams absolutely overperform.
How do you get the buy-in then? If it's difficult, why is it difficult?
There's a Japanese proverb that says "Ishi no eni mo sanben," right? So, even if it takes even more than 3 years. I think that by kind of culturally, people build culture, they build teams over a longer period of time, and that there's a certain time that necessary to sort of to change culture, to show that you have commitment. And I think that if you come in with very short-term focus in terms of building culture, the immediate impression you're going to give is, oh, this guy's just here for a short period of time, doesn't really care about us. All he or she cares about is performance. We'll just bide our time until the next person comes in. Which, if you get the performance, is great, but it also means that what you don't have is you're managing based solely on processes and orders, and not so much based on commitment from your employees. I think a lot of Japanese employees, they're looking to make an emotional commitment, long-term emotional commitment to where they work, and they're looking for that same level of commitment from their leaders.
And if you've got a 3-5 year posting, which a lot of leaders from the foreign multinational companies get, maybe 4 or 5 years, how do you build that up in that relatively shorter space?
A couple of things that I would say. One is, I would say is don't only talk with your inner circle. That the inner circle is really important, but being engaged beyond your inner circle, being engaged with the everyday employee, showing interest in what people, the different functions of the company and what different people are doing. That it imparts a feeling of meaningfulness to all your employees. Like, all of us are meaningful, not just the inner circle. So I believe doing that through events and different types of engagement, lunches, different types of meetings. I mean, that caring about the voice of your employees and not being too focused on one set of opinion, one group of influence leaders over another, I think gives people a much more balanced view of what's happening within their organization.
It's a bit like management by wandering around in the sort of the Western context. That became very popular as a concept. I guess that's what you're really talking about, isn't it?
And I still do that, but I like to wander around. I like to you just go up to somebody and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's happening in your life? Just walking into a meeting and sitting down and listening. Now, of course, that makes everybody uncomfortable, but not to make them uncomfortable, just to show that every aspect of the organization matters. And I think I told you I created an acronym for myself for leadership, and my acronym is VICES. And VICES, which stands for Vision, Integrity, Competency, Efficiency, and Sustained Success. Now, vision, we talked about, it's having and vision can be, the company vision, there's shared same sense of purpose, but you can have a project vision, you can have different types of, but this idea that, okay, creating a sense of purpose so that everybody says, yeah, what we're doing matters. Integrity, I think, is also really important. And I look at integrity particularly in Japan, is leaders tend to be very, they don't tend to be transparent. And I think that...
Is it Japanese leaders?
I think a lot of Japanese leaders tend to not be very transparent. They're typically in their office with a closed door.
Okay. Executive suite.
There's the executives, and that's just not in Japan, but in Western. But what I find is that, I believe that the only way that people can understand integrity is if you're transparent and show people, and you act as a role model. The other thing that I see a lot of, and this is now talking a little bit about Japanese leadership. But I think it happens in the West too. Is a lot of times people say, "You need to earn my trust." I think that's a tremendously demotivating message, and I always turn it around. I would say, "I trust you," and that I say, I start from the perspective of trust. Now, trusting doesn't mean that you're not accountable and that you're not going to be checked, but my focus is, you have my trust, and as long as you perform, you'll keep my trust. So it's, you don't start by having to earn somebody's trust, my trust. You start by having my trust, and you could lose it, but at that point it becomes very motivating, because at that point, not only are you trusted, but then it's like, okay, now I have real responsibility. And I kind of remember liking that again to my Shonin Kempo days, whereas, my sensei would always say, well, if you don't earn my trust, I'm not going to show you my secret techniques. And I like the guy. He's a great guy. But but that's a very common actually leadership perspective, I think. But I say, well, okay, one, I might wait 5-10 years and then find out that it wasn't worth learning. But so to me it was actually very demotivating.
Today it's on the internet anyway.
It is, but what you really want is people to start from day one thinking, I can, because I have trust, and if I perform, I can just keep. There's no ceiling for me. When I talk about competency and competency and professionalism, not only, as I talked about, when there's a sense of purpose and a sense of vision, that there's a sense of, okay, the job matters. And then as a leader, I always found that if the job matters, then everybody in the organization matters. And then showing, whether it's through voice of customer, voice of employee, doing things that engaged people so that you actually walk the talk and say, no, because what we do matters, what you do matters. My efficiency, actually, I think is very much of something that is important, particularly for Japan. If you think about, and you talked about Western leaders, when you want to get in, get the information, make a decision, be quick, be efficient. Japanese society has not really been built around efficiency. and having been here 30 some years, been in PTA groups, children's, different types of sports teams, I'm thinking, oh my God. And I'm sitting there, and sometimes I just want to take over and say, okay, I can save us an hour and we can be done in 5 minutes. But recognizing on the one hand that allowing for the social dance to happen so that allows everybody to get the buy-in. That's, on the one hand, that's very important. But on the other hand, I think as a leader, what I always try to do is communicate to my team that their time matters. Not only does their time matter to the company because the company's paying for it, but that their time matters because if their time matters and we can work with them, then they can do more with their time, not only within the company, but outside the company. That's a message the Japanese leadership rarely gets across. And you see that in how it's more difficult for women to be engaged in the workforce, especially if they want to have families. But how people deal with their free time, family time. And so to me, as a leader, focusing on efficiency and then really valuing performance over the amount of time that people put in. I think over time, I've been able to create a much better environment where people feel that they can both be fully committed to the company and also have fun outside of the company. And finally, I talk about sustained success. I always look at it as a leader, you need to help your team come up with little wins. I think sometimes projects become so large that it becomes being able to celebrate wins gets pushed too far off in the future. You want to be able to be in a situation where you're with your teams, where you can celebrate little wins. Because one of the important things about being able to celebrate little wins is then it's easier to point out losses. Whereas if you're not in a position where you create an environment where you are looking at both wins and losses and celebrating the wins, the losses in Japan, when somebody loses in Japan, it becomes too catastrophic. And what I've found is, we've seen this all, is that this fear of losing, this fear of making a mistake, if you can sort of create a better environment where you're celebrating the little wins and then saying, well, you didn't meet the standard here, you didn't do as well here. It's harder to create that environment if you make the wins too few and far between.
So you're celebrating on the way through the project rather than just the final summation of the project and result. You're actually celebrating somewhere on the way in.
And there's sometimes the process can be great, and the results can not work out. And you want to be able to, and that's something where I think the leader needs to take ownership of that.
So how do we deal with poor performance in Japan? How do we deal? I mean, I understand the fear of failure, I understand the risk aversion, get all that, but how do we deal with poor performance?
Actually, I think poor performance is easy to deal with. It's what I think is harder to deal with. Poor performance, you just say, you didn't meet my, this just doesn't work. I think you need to be very fair, and you need to be very clear as to why it's poor performance. But poor performance to me is the easiest thing to deal with. The more difficult thing is to deal with mediocre performance, that where people are being held back because they'd rather they're not going to take a chance to do something, to do something really good because they're afraid they might not succeed. That's where you have to sort of be there saying, a good performer is easy, and a poor performer is easy. To me, it's the mediocre ones that are the hard, because that's the majority of the people. Is like, how do you create a better environment to push them up? And that's as where I talk about engagement and celebrating small wins and correcting small losses. That I think then allows us to push a greater number of that middle group up here, and maybe even push more people down here, because this group you just have to recycle out. I mean, that's just that to me is now, not that it's always easy in Japan, but that's clear. It's this part that I find is where you win, or in the big sense. That's where you can either create something great or just stay good to mediocre.
And if you had to give, say, three three, it doesn't have to be three, but three is always a typical number. If you had to give three pieces of advice to new leaders coming to Japan, they've been sent here by their companies, or they've arrived here and they've started businesses and they're new to their businesses, and you gave them some advice, what would be three pieces of critical advice you'd suggest for them?
Well, I'll kind of repeat myself. I'd start with this. I'd start with the idea that you're talking to your people and say, I'm going to trust and check and send a message that you believe in your people, but you want to create an open process of how you people are accountable and verified. Two, I would caution a new leader to be patient. Start by listening versus trying to start by being heard. That the idea that the leader who listens and actually truly gains insight throughout their organization is the leader who's going to make the biggest change. And then the third thing I would do is, and I've done this on many occasions, identify who are the biggest obstacles in your organization or in your culture, and remove them immediately and publicly. Because if you've identified who the cancer is, the organization already knows who that cancer is this way. And if you're very clear that cancer is not tolerated and removed, then my engagement and empathy and trust principles work. But if you accept cancer or spend too much time deliberating about the obstacles or the cancer, it just grows. So that would be my three pieces of advice.
Harry, is there anything I haven't asked you in the sense of talking about leadership in Japan, which I should have? Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things. The one thing I would say is about leadership in Japan, I know that over the years I've met with lots of people who've really felt that Japan's a challenging place, and that that there's lack of innovation or lack of new ideas or communication. That's not been my experience, and I've run with several different companies, as I said, with different types of from sizes ranging anywhere from 10 to 1,000. But if you put the time in, and I think if you go back to integrity and vision, and then also get very clear about performance, I believe that Japanese teams will thrive. But as I also said, I've also never been afraid of if there are people who are true obstacles, making sure that they're removed quickly. I was at one of the places. I had just I won't say that, but I had just come in, and I had a new sales manager, and I was working on some things, and I told him specifically, and I just changed, and I was overseeing the Shop Japan side of the Oakland business, and I just changed, and I had to go off. I was in the United States on a business trip, and I specifically told him what my expectations were in the week that I was gone. And there was a specific project that he wanted to work on, but I said, no, we've made a decision, we're not going to work on that project. Got back into the office, it was on Friday, he wasn't there, and asked where he was, and he said that he had defied my order and had gone on the specific project. And I said, fine. I called in our general affairs guys. I had them remove his desk. So when he returned, there was no desk.
Physical desk.
Completely. He was removed. Now, he had put him off to some place in the company until he decided to quit. But to me, I was so thankful for that opportunity, actually, because it immediately established that, okay, I would listen, I was going to be engaged, but once something had been decided upon, we were all going in the same direction, or you were going to be off the bus.
Fair enough too. Well, Harry, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
This has been fascinating to hear Harry's story, going from startup, from teaching English in Gifu to running a $700 million company, which he's built with some partners and a lot of hard work on the part of the teams, I'm sure, over the years. And there are a lot of lessons in here. I like Harry's acronym, VICES. That's something that it's interesting choice of word to have VICES for the leadership.
That's the reason why I say VICES, because it's also, on the one hand, it's a checklist for me, but it's also caution. Because one of the things I found is when I have successfully created culture and the values in Japan, which I've done on several adventures that I've done, you start to feel like you're a god.
Okay.
And at some point you have to remember, no, don't become so overwhelmed with your greatness that you forget that you're just one step from just being back on the street. And I've sort of had my opportunity where as small companies, large companies, successful companies, not successful companies. I try to keep perspective.
So that's interesting. So VICES actually has got two angles on it there, which is even more interesting. Well, this has been a great talk, and we really appreciate Harry's time. He's someone who I certainly admire as a leader. I've known him a long time. I've visited his companies at different times over the years, and I think there's something very special going on here in this interview today. So, Harry, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the Leadership Japan series. If you found the program useful, then tell your family, friends, and colleagues. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. You can contact me at greg.story@dalecarnegie.com. Lots of great stuff on our website, enjapan.dalecarnegie.com. Until the next episode, take what you thought valuable, put it into action, because idea application is what makes winners winners. So be one of them, and that's what Harry did. He put his ideas into action, and he has become a total success here in Japan. Now remember, I can help you. I'm your corporate coaching and training guy here in Japan. I will help you grow your business. Just get in touch with me and let me help you.